to mute yourself, and when you want to ask a question, just unmute and ask. So let me try to share my screen.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
I am Anand Kumar Raidu, sir.
Okay, yes, I got it. Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let me, before I begin, maybe let me say a few words about the course. So first of all, it's an unusual kind of course because I cannot see your face, and hence I cannot make out whether you are following or not. Okay, so you have to keep asking questions. If there is any doubt at any stage, right, even if it's a trivial doubt, you please ask questions. And you remember to unmute yourself before you ask the question. Okay, otherwise I'll not hear you. And you can send it on chat, but I'm not sure that I'll be able to follow all the chat messages very efficiently. So it's best if you just ask instead of sending questions on chat. So this will be a course on quantum field theory. Okay, in fact, the first course on quantum field theory, and I understand that some of you probably had already a course on quantum field theory before. And there are, of course, many good books in quantum field theory, and I'll try to send a list of some old and some new books by email. So you should really think of these as some overall guideline, and you can use the books to supplement whatever I'll be teaching. So as I think you have already been told that there will be a mid-semester exam, okay, which will be a take-home exam, obviously. So I'll give you a set of questions which you have to solve and send within a certain time. You can use your notes book. The other thing is you will get homework. So the division of marks will be about 30% on homework, 30% in the mid-semester exam, and the rest, that is 40% in the final exam. So okay, only way to deal with a system of photons systematically is to use the techniques of quantum field theory. But in fact, most particles are like this. At high enough energy, you have to use quantum field theory for every particle. So for example, you know that the number of electrons is conserved, but when you collide two electrons at very high energy, it can produce electron-positron pairs besides the two electrons. So again, the number of electrons is not really conserved because starting with 2 electrons, so you get 3 electrons and 1 positron. And again, we will see that we will need quantum field theory to discuss processes of this kind. So the other thing is that it's also a convenient tool when the number of particles is large but not conserved. Sorry, when the number of particles is large but conserved. Okay? Because if it's not conserved, of course, you have to use quantum field theory. But even when the number of particles is conserved, but it's a large number of particles, we'll see that quantum field theory is useful. But before we jump into the details, we'll begin with a familiar system where the number of particles is conserved and you have a finite number of particles. So we'll begin with the simplest possible case. And this is the case of a single particle in 3 dimensions, which is moving under the influence of some potential, which I'll call U. And this, we are not assuming any spherical symmetry, so this U can be any function of the position of the particle. So we know how to write down the Schrodinger equation for this system. Okay, here it is. Psi is the wave function, and H hat is the Hamiltonian operator, which I have written down here. Okay, so this is the kinetic term, and this is the potential energy. So what we'll do first is to review the procedure for finding a general solution to equations of this kind. Okay, a time-dependent Schrodinger equation of this kind. And I'm sure you have learned in your quantum mechanics course that the one way to find a general solution is to first find the eigenstates of H hat. We'll assume that H hat is time independent. So we can set up the eigenvalue equation for h hat. Okay, so UNs are eigenfunctions, and we solve the equation h hat on UN is equal to En on UN. And by solving this, you get a set of eigenvalues, typically an infinite set of eigenvalues, and the corresponding eigenfunctions, which I'll call even. And in this analysis, we'll assume that En is positive. Now, this really doesn't play any role in the final results because you can always shift energy. You can always add an overall constant to the energy. Okay, and we'll do it many times in this course. That has really no effect because what we measure are differences in energies, except when you go to gravity, where of course gravity couples to total energy. Okay, but in normal quantum systems, we measure differences in energies. So you can always take En to be positive. But more generally, okay, keeping in mind what we'll do eventually, we can imagine that in the definition of En, we have added the rest mass energy of the system. So for example, if you are dealing with a hydrogen atom, there is a negative binding energy, but we can add to that negative binding energy the mass of the hydrogen atom, or the mc squared, where m is the mass of the hydrogen atom and c is the velocity of light, to that energy, and that will always make En to be positive. So whatever way we want to think about it, we'll assume that En is positive and go ahead with that. Are there any questions at this point? Okay, so let me proceed. The other thing we'll assume are that these are discrete energy eigenstates. Now, of course, this is not always true in nature. Okay, we know that particle in an infinite volume has typically continuous energy eigenstates, okay, besides possibly discrete states such as with bound states. But we'll imagine that you have put the particle in a box for now, so the energy eigenvalues are discrete. Okay, again, this will not really be important for our purpose, but it just makes writing things more convenient to write in terms of discrete sum rather than continuous integrals. So let's assume that the energy eigenvalues are discrete. So even will be the complete basis of states, and we will normalize events by the standard way. So we already know that the energy eigenvalues, eigenstates are orthonormal, okay, at least orthogonal. So by adjusting the overall multiplicative constant in even, we will make sure that each even is normalized in the standard. So given this setup, we know how to write down a general solution, and here it is. A general solution is given by a linear combination of these events, because any function, sorry, I should have written a r here. So this psi is a function of t and r. Okay, that you should correct in the notes. So a function of t and r, okay, because it's a function of r, you can always expand in this complete set of bases, un of r, and the coefficients of expansion will be functions of t. And then you can read out the t dependence of n from the Hamilton's equation by substituting in the Schrodinger equation here, and we get an of t as an of 0 comes to the minus I n t over h bar. So up to this point, it's just single particle quantum mechanics, and I believe all of you are completely familiar with this. So now we are going to consider a system of n particles of same mass, and we will assume that they are each moving under the same potential, and for now let's also assume that there is no mutual interaction. So each particle is subject to a potential, but there is no mutual interaction between the particles. So we'll denote by Ri the position of the ith particle, and this gradient with subscript I will mean that the gradient, this is the gradient operator with respect to the ith particle coordinate. So for example, if Ri is the three components of Ri are xi, yi and zi, then this will mean that it's a vector with partial derivative with respect to xi, partial derivative with respect to yi, and partial derivative with respect to zi. Okay, so for each I, it's a different differential. And now the wave function of this combined system, which will be a function of R1 to Rn, and also time. I forgot to write the time argument here. So this will satisfy Schrodinger equation, okay, which is given here. H hat n now is an n particle Hamiltonian. It's a Hamiltonian of n particles. And because we have assumed that the particles do not interact, the Hamiltonian for n particles is given by simply the sum of the Hamiltonian of individual particles. So H hat I is here is the same H hat that I introduced here, except that all the derivatives are with respect to the ith particle, and the potential is also evaluated at the Ri position. Is this clear? The system is okay so far?
Okay, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now to describe this system, suppose you want to describe the time evolution of this system, we'll have to choose a basis of states again. And here, in fact, we don't have to do any new work. We can simply construct the basis of states as a product of the eigenfunctions of the original basis states. Okay, so for single particles, the eigenfunctions were un of r. So now we are going to take the product un1 of r1 up to unn of rn, and this is what we will denote by w with carrying labels n1 to nn, and it's of course a function of r1 to rn. So given this, we can first of all calculate the eigenvalue. Suppose you apply h hat n on such a state, then the eigenvalue will be given by simply the sum of the corresponding eigenvalues of individual particles. So it will be en1 plus en2 plus enn, okay, because each h hat I will basically pick up contribution from only one of these n states, right? Because it's a differential operator in the ith particle coordinates, right? So it will only act on the uni of Ri term, okay, and reproduce eigenvalue. So the h hat n acting on such a state will have eigenvalue that is given by the sum of the e's, and hence when you expand psi in this basis, the corresponding coefficients will time evolve as e to the power minus I times en1 plus enn d over h bar. Furthermore, if each of these eigenfunctions is normalized to 1, as I have already said here, okay, each of these is normalized to 1, then it's easy to check that this is also normalized. That if we take wn1 to nn, which is this, take the mod square of this and integrate over r1 to rn, you will get product of n factors of 1, and you will get 1. On the other hand, if any of the ni's differ, right, suppose it's un1 r1 and um1 r1, okay, then the inner product will be 0. So it's not only normalized, not only that w's are normalized, but they are also mutually orthogonal. Okay, if any of the ni's differ, you will get 0 answer for the inner product. Is it okay?
Clear, sir.
Okay, so now we are going to make the system a little more complicated. So we'll consider the case when the particles are identical, and furthermore, let's assume that the particles are bosonic particles. Now, if you have identical particles, and if they are bosons, then we know that the wave function must be symmetric under the exchange of their quantum numbers, and in this case, under the exchange of the Ri's. So if we exchange Ri with Rj, then the wave function must be symmetric. So the number of allowed wave functions for a system of identical particles is much less than the number of allowed wave functions when they are non-identical. In particular, a wave function like this is not an allowed wave function because it's not symmetric when you exchange, say, R1 and R2. Now, we can still expand psi. Any psi which is symmetric under such exchanges, we can still expand it in the same basis that we introduced. But it's clear that this basis is redundant. It's redundant because we are only trying to expand functions which are symmetric, whereas this basis includes states which are not symmetric. Does it mean that we cannot expand a symmetric function in this basis? So we have to choose the appropriate coefficients to symmetrize it. But it's certainly not necessary to have so many basis states to expand a generally symmetric function. So for this reason, what we will do is that we will choose the basis states to be also symmetric under the exchange of any pair of particles. And we will learn slowly how to do this. So here is a new basis that we define, which is the sum over all permutations of Ri's of this product. We take this product and then add n factorial different terms which are related to each other by permutations of the Ri's. And then we normalize this by 1 over square root of n factorial. Now, as we learned that this normalization doesn't always work. Okay, that this state is not always normalized to 1. But let's keep the definition as it is, as I have given here, and proceed and see what these basis states give, what kind of properties these basis states have. So is the definition clear of this basis state? Sayan, is it clear?
It is clear, sir.
Sinjini?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Now, from here you can also see that this basis is also automatically symmetric under the exchange of the ni's. Because once you have permuted the Ri's, that's equivalent to summing over permutations of the ni's. So even though we didn't ask for these basis states to be symmetric under the permutations of the ni's, they have already automatically become symmetric under the permutations of the ni's. Which means that if we use this kind of labeling, we may be overcounting the number of basis states. So for example, if we have a 2-particle state, then u1, 2 and u2, 1 should not be counted as separate basis states. Because according to this definition, if you follow this definition, then you can easily convince yourself that u1, 2 and u2, 1 are the same states. So we'll try to avoid this overcounting by using some convention, and this is just a convention. You can choose your own convention. So first of all, we'll label the original eigenstates, the eigenstates of the single particle Hamiltonian, these eigenstates, in some order. We can order them by their energy eigenvalues. The lowest one, n equal to 1 will be the ground state, n equal to 2 will be the first excited state, and so on. If there is degeneracy, you have to use some other quantum numbers to order them. But you can choose some other quantum numbers altogether to order them, doesn't matter. But let's fix some particular ordering, some naming of which state corresponds to which level, right? Which state is 1, which state is 2, and so on. So given this, we declare that we'll always choose these labels to be in the order of increasing levels. So for example, u21 will not be allowed, okay, because here 2 is larger than 1. u12 will be allowed. Okay, so this way will make sure that we count each basis state only once. So if we follow this convention, then u124 is an allowed basis state, u1124 will be allowed basis state, u122 will be allowed, and so on. But u214 will not be an allowed state because 2 and 1 are in the wrong order. u212 will not be in the order in allowed basis state because u2 and 1 are in the opposite order. Yes.
So when we are taking that 1 by root n factorial, then isn't this automatically taken into account that u21 plus and u12 and they are normalized by 1 over root 2 factorial?
Yes, that is true. So that takes care of the normalization of u12, right? But that doesn't take care of the fact that these are the same states. So suppose somebody tells you that you want to expand the wave function in a certain basis, right?
Okay.
Then you will introduce a coefficient of u12, but you shouldn't also independently introduce a coefficient of u21,
Oh, I see.
right?
Okay.
Because they are the same state, right?
Okay.
So when you make the expansion, it should be expanded in a set of linearly independent basis states. u12 and u21 are not linearly independent.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Yes.
So any other question?
Sir, in the new where you have defined the new basis, you
Yes.
have taken the permutations of R1 to Rn. So it will contain n factorial terms, right?
Yes.
Oh, so that is why you are taking that 1 by root over n factorial for the
Yes. So
no.
what is this factor? Let's just say that we have defined it this way. Right?
Yeah.
We will see that for certain class of states, this gives the correct normalization, but it doesn't always give the correct normalization. Okay. So right now, let's just put 1 over square root of n factorial just because there are n factorial terms in this.
Okay. Yeah.
But this 1 over n square root of n factorial doesn't take into account the double counting of the basis states, right?
Yeah.
This is normalization. Okay? Whereas here, what we are talking about is whether you are counting the same basis state twice.
Okay. But one thing is a little counterintuitive. That is that you have labeled the basis in terms of n1 to n number of integers. So it may have the particle that is labeled by the R1 and N2, R2 and N2. So they may be in a lower energy state than the first particle. So how are we taking into account that?
Yeah, because you look at this side over here, right?
Yeah.
So on this side, we are saying that you have a un1 to nn,
Yeah.
and from this definition, it follows that
Yes.
it's completely symmetric under arbitrary exchanges of the ni's. Even though
Okay.
here you have some number permutations of ri's, right?
Right.
Here, if you fix the ri's as they are and permute the ni's, you
Yeah.
get the same state.
Yes.
Okay?
Oh,
So
okay.
some of the permutations of the ri's have automatically also symmetrized under the permutations of the ni's.
Okay. Yeah.
So because of this, u12 and u21 are the same state, right? If you just write it out by following this formula,
Yeah.
right? You'll have u1 r1, u2 r2
Right.
plus u2 r1 plus u1 r2, right?
Right. It
Whereas
will just repeat.
will be the opposite order, but it's the same set of terms.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
That's why
Right.
these are the same basis states, and that's why you have to make sure that you count each basis state only once.
Okay. Yeah. Understood.
You are not allowing because these have already been counted here. So this one is the same as this one. u212 is the same as u122 and so on.
Okay. So we are following a convention so that we have to we can keep track of everything.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So here is a basis state again. So now we are going to try to check the normalization of these basis states. So normalization means that you want to check what happens if you take the inner product between two such basis states. And I'll assume that the ni's have been ordered, li's have been ordered, okay, by following the convention that I mentioned in the order of increasing level number. So the first thing, now these are things which you have to think about it or maybe do some calculations and check yourself. Okay, but I'll try to motivate with some example maybe. That unless Li and Ni are same for each I, the result vanishes. Which means that in order for this not to be 0, you have to make sure that the Ni's that come in this order, say U112, if it's 112 here, Li's also have to be 112, otherwise the result will vanish. This may not be totally obvious, but it basically follows from the following observation, right? So imagine that you have U Ni, N1 to Nn, defined this way. Similarly, U L1 to Ln will be defined by a similar sum. So when you take the inner product like this, there are n factorial terms over here and n factorial terms coming in from here. So there will be n factorial square possible terms. But let's pick any one of them and see under what condition it can be non-zero. If you pick any one of them, then the only way it can be non-zero is if for that particular ordering, right? It may not be n1, right? It may be say n3. R1 may be accompanied by n3 in that. But that must agree with whatever R1 is accompanied in this. So as a set, okay, forget about the ordering. As a set, n1 to nn must coincide with L1 to Ln. Is this point clear?
Yes.
Is it clear to everybody? Otherwise, I'll maybe ask some people. Aparajita, is it okay? This argument is clear?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
So I was asking that suppose we have U112, then my labels on position will still be R1, R2, and R3, right?
Okay. Yes. So U112. See, it's also of course invariant under permutations, right? Of the RIs.
Yeah.
So even if you change it, it's the same. It doesn't matter.
So it will still be U1 R1 times U1 R2 times U2 R3.
Plus all the other terms.
Yes. Permutations.
I have here, right? U112. Let me show you here. U112. So you start with this. Can you see the screen?
Yes, I can see.
Okay. So you start with this, but then you have to add permutations of R1, R2, and R3, right? So if you do that, you will find this result, right?
Yeah. Yes.
R1, R2 exchange, you will not do anything. That will give a factor of 2. R1, R3 exchange, U1, R3 who is here. U1, R3. I missed U1, R3. Yeah, here it is. U1, R3. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
This meaning is clear. Okay, so this statement, right? It is not. It requires some thought to convince yourself that this is true. Let me multiply. So the claim is that unless Li and Ni are equal for every I, the result is 0. Is there doubt in this? If there is doubt, please ask. Aparajita, is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Manojit,
Yes, sir.
this argument is okay, that you have to make sure that each Li is equal to Ni. As I said, they must coincide, and because then you have ordered, right? You have chosen this ordering, right? Then position by position they must coincide. Right? So U122 and U124 will have 0 inner product. Okay, because somewhere there will be 1,4 and 1,2, and their inner product will be 0. Okay. So let's suppose that Li is equal to Ni for every I, right? Because if it's not equal, then the result is 0 anyway. If Li and Ni are equal for every I, and furthermore, if all the Ni's are different, okay, like U124, but not like this. Here all the Ni's are not different, right? Like U124. If all the Ni's are different, then the claim is that the result is 1. So let's see why this is the case. So now we are taking it as a mod square of this, right? Because all the Li's are equal to the Ni's anyway. So you get a 1 over n factorial overall. Now there are n factorial terms here, and you are trying to take the product of those n factorial terms with another n factorial terms which are complex conjugates of these. Now you can clearly see that the diagonal terms all give 1. Okay. If the kth permutation here is paired with the kth permutation on the other one, then you will have UNI star UNI. For every RI, right, it may not be N1. You may get UN to R1 star, UN to R1. That's still 1. So all the diagonal terms, that means the kth term here, when you compare with the kth term in the complex conjugate, they will give 1. But any non-diagonal term will give you 0. Because somewhere or the other, there will be a difference. Right? Non-diagonal term means that it's not in the same order. Right? N1 to Nn, the order in which it appears here will be different from the order in which it will appear in the complex conjugate. So even though there are n factorial square terms to begin with, only n factorial of those terms give 1, the rest give 0, and that's why you get 1, because there is 1 over n square root of n factorial square, that's 1 over n factorial, and this cancels the n factorial contributions. Each of them give 1, and we get that for Li is equal to Ni for every I, and all the Ni is different, the norm is 1. Okay, in fact, that's the reason why we put in this 1 over square root of n factorial. Are there questions? Is it clear? Okay, so let me proceed. So now we consider a more complicated situation where not all the Ni's are different. Li is still equal to Ni, but some of the Ni's can be equal. For example, if suppose you are trying to calculate U112 star U112. So in this case, what happens is the sum of the terms in the expression for T's are equal, because permuting identical indices will not change the term. So here I was describing this example, so let me go back there first. U112, for example. We start with U1 R1, U1 R2, U2 R3, and then there is permutation of R1, R2, R3. So there are 6 different terms, right? 3 factorial terms. But you can easily see that of all these 6 terms, there will be pairwise equal. Okay? For example, in this term, when you exchange R1 and R2, you get the same result. So you will get 2 U1 R1, U1 R2, U2 R3. So in this term, when you exchange R1 and R3, it produces the same result. Similarly, here when you exchange R2 and R3, it gives same result. So even though there are 6 terms to begin with, they are actually paired. There are only 3 independent terms, each come with a coefficient of 2. Okay. So clearly the calculation is more complicated. So to understand what happens in this case, what we are going to do is to use a slightly different way of labeling the basis states, and that's called the occupation number. So earlier, the way we had labeled the basis states is by specifying the labels n1 to nn in increasing order, which tells us which states are occupied. Okay, and here some labels may be repeated. Instead,
sorry, sir. May I interrupt once? That if 2 n's are equal, so
yes,
it will create a problem that the some non-diagonal terms would also be one. You are saying?
yeah, you can take it through. Think of it that way. Yes, some non-diagonal terms will also give you 1.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right? Or if you pair it this way, as I have done here,
Yes.
then non-diagonal terms still give you 0.
Yeah.
But when you square this, instead of getting 1, you will get 4.
Right. Okay.
You will get 4 plus 4 plus 4
Yes.
divided by 6,
Mhm.
and normalization gives you 2 instead of 1.
Right. Yes. Understood.
Okay. So what is the occupation number representation? So here what we will do is to specify how many times the label 1 appears, how many times the label 2 appears, and so on. So for example, take U112. So instead of labeling it this way, we'll still label it this way, but we'll assign to it an occupation number representation as 2100. Why 2, 1, 0, 0? Because label 1 is occupied twice. Label 2 is occupied once. The others are all occupied 0 times. Okay, so we'll call this 2, 1, 0, 0. So more generally, occupation number or occupancy number mi will tell us how many particles occupy the ith state. Okay, it's a multi-particle state, right? So this is telling us how many particles occupy the ith state. Because the particles are indistinguishable, okay, they're identical, it doesn't make sense to ask which of the particles occupy the ith state. But how many particles occupy the ith state is a meaningful question, and that's what mi tells us. So if you have an occupancy number m1, m2, etc., this means that the nth state appears mn. Be 0 for a finite particle state, right? Because the total occupation number, of course, has to add up to n. So sum over n to equal to 1 to infinity mn has to be n, which basically means that most of the mn should be 0, right? Because the system has infinite number of energy levels, so most of them should be 0. Okay, so are there questions? Okay, so let's now consider a state like this. So this state is labeled in the original way, but let's further suppose that it is occupancy number m1, m2, etc. And now, given in terms of the occupancy numbers, it is easy to count how many terms will be different and how many terms will be the same. So clearly, summing over all n factorial terms, then not all the n factorial terms inside the summation are different. For example, if the occupancy number of the particle of state 1 is 2, okay, then exchanging the first 2 will not make any difference in this term, for example. Okay. So what we are going to do is we'll try to group these terms. And the claim is that the number of terms which are equal in this n factorial, among the n factorial terms, okay, you can divide them into groups. Each group contains identical terms. The number of terms in each group is m1 factorial times m2 factorial and so on, product of mi factorials. And the reason is that if mi is, let's say m1, right? That means 1 appears m1 times. So exchanging those labels, those m1 labels, permuting those m1 labels will not change the state, right? Because permuting the ones will give the same state m1 factorial times. Similarly, permuting the states that carry label 2 will give m factorial terms and so on. So the number of terms that each group contains, which are all identical, are m1 factorial times m2 factorial and so on. Okay, the product of mi factorial. Is this counting clear? The example here, again, here the occupancy number is 2, 1 and all zeros, right? So the counting goes, it's 2 factorial times 1 factorial times product of 0 factorials, that should be 2, and you indeed see that the number of terms which are the same is 2, okay, and that's true for every term of this form. Is this okay? Can I proceed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Jisun, are you around?
Yes, sir.
Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so now we are going to proceed. So since these many terms are identical, so each group contains these many terms. So the number of groups is the total original number of terms that we had, n factorial, divided by product of mi factorials. So n factorial divided by m1 factorial times m2 factorial and so on. So with this, we can rewrite this u in this way. Okay, this is a formula of writing this. So we have this 1 over square root of n factorial outside. Then what I have done here is that I have taken out a factor of m1 factorial times m2 factorial and so on, because this is common factor, because each group contains these many identical terms, right? So this factor can be taken out. And what is left are groups that are different groups, okay, which are not the same. So W1, W2 up to WP, where P is this number n factorial over m1 factorial times m2 factorial, so on. Okay. So these W's are basically product of U's. Each W contains term like this, possibly with some indices repeated. Okay. So W's are these basis states. We had introduced the W's, if you remember, at the product states. These are W's are of this form. Okay. That's the product state, not symmetrized.
Hello, sir. So what we are doing is we are tensor producting the Hilbert spaces of n particles. So shouldn't the number of basis states should be multiplication of all the individual basis states? So here the number is getting reduced somehow.
Okay, so you are not tensor producting, right? Because we have to symmetrize. Right? Because
Yes,
it's identical
yes.
factors. So if you are taking tensor product, then you are correct. The number of basis states will be just the product of the number of basis states for each, right? But because you are symmetrizing, the number is much reduced.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so in this case, it was n factor, all the n factorial terms are independent. Okay, so it was reduced by factor of n factorial. Here, some of these are identical. Okay, and that's how you get this overall factor outside.
Okay.
So this doesn't
Thank
mean P is the number of basis states, right? The P is the number of states that appear in this particular kind of wave functions, where m1 of them are identical, m2 of them are identical, and so on. There are, of course, other wave functions for which you need more basis states. Is that if you have a state in which m1 of the occupant, the first one is occupied m1 times, second one is occupied m2 times, and so on, then such a state, when you express in the original basis, right, which is the basis of the product Hilbert space, then you will get P independent terms. Is this clear? Please. Yes.
So shouldn't this be m1 factorial identical terms in the W1 group, m2 factorial in the W2 group?
Yes, so that I have taken out that factor.
Sir,
So outside,
m1 factorial into W1, m2 factorial into W2, shouldn't it be like that?
yes. So you can take it inside, right? But this is just a sum, right?
Yes.
I can always factor out an overall factor. You are right that it's this. Oh, the m1 factorial times W1. No, it's not like that. Okay. Let me say W1 has a product of all n, right?
Yes.
Okay. So each W1 is a product of n such terms.
Yes.
Inside these n such terms, m1 are identical. But in the same product, m2 are also identical.
Yes.
Right? It's not that inside W1, M1 are identical, inside W2, M2 are identical, and so on.
Could you please repeat this once?
Yes. Let me go back here. Let's take this example. Imagine that you have U1122.
Yes.
Okay? So then there will be U2 of R4 here.
Yes.
Right? Now you have permutations of R1, R2, R3, R4. Now let's see how many times the same term appears. You have U1, R1, U1, R2, U2, R3, U2, R4, right?
Yes.
So when you exchange R1 and R2, you get the same term.
Yes.
Also, when you exchange R3 and R4,
Yes.
you get the same term.
Yes.
right? If you exchange R1, R2 and R3, R4, again we get the same term,
Yes.
right? So there will be the original term plus 3 more terms, right?
Okay.
Which are identical. That's 2 times 2.
Okay, got it.
Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay, that's why it becomes a product, right? It's not that W1 has only M1 factorial terms, W2 has M2 factorial terms, and so on. Is it okay?
Yes.
Any further doubts?
No.
Anybody else? Okay, so we'll proceed. So now you can also convince yourself that different terms Wi are orthonormal, right? When you now take the inner product of this itself, okay, then different terms Wi are orthonormal because at least one of the Ri is different. Okay, again, let me go back to this example. Right? Let's take the product of these two. You get U1 R1 star, U1 R1 star. Right? That gives you 1. But for R2, you get U1 R2 star, U2 R2 star. That gives you 0. Right? So that this inner product will give you 0. And similarly for these two. So the point is that between W1 and W2, when you take the inner product, at least in one of the Ri's, the label will differ. Otherwise, they would have been all dumped inside W1, right? If the two terms are actually identical, then you would have dumped into W1. Okay? But W1 already contains a maximal number of terms which are identical. Okay? So these Wi's are orthonormal. So because of this, the total norm now, so we can calculate. So when you take the total norm, it's 1 over n factorial. Then you have the square of this. And then there are p different terms, each is normalized to 1. So you have a multiplicative factor of p. And now if we use this value of p, which is here, we see that 1 over n factorial cancels this 1 over n factorial from p. One of the m1 factorial products in the denominator cancels one of these factors. But we are left with this one factor of product over I mi factorial. So what we learn is that in such cases, this state is not normalized to 1. Is this clear? Now we could normalize it by dividing by this factor, 1 over square root of this factor, but we will not do that, right? We will keep it this way because we will see that it's a more convenient basis to use for something that you want to do later. Okay, so here is the example. I have already shown it to you before, okay, but let me do this. So U112, we start with this and you have 6 different terms, okay, so 5 more terms. But of those 6 different terms, they are grouped into 3 groups, each with 2 terms. And when you calculate the inner product by following the same steps that I described, you get a factor of 2, which is 2 factorial. Is everything clear about the examples? Even if the earlier points are not completely clear, right? You have to work out probably to make it completely clear. This example should be completely clear, right? That we do see from this example that U112, as you have defined, is not normalized to 1, but it's normalized to 2. Okay, which is what is expected because according to this formula, you should have gotten 2. Okay. So now we'll analyze the action of n particle Hamiltonian on these basis states. Okay. So this is the n particle Hamiltonian. Okay. It's just because the particles are non-interacting. Okay. They are identical, but they are still non-interacting. So the n particle Hamiltonian is just given by the sum over h hat i's, individual or single particle Hamiltonian from 1 to n. Now, if you take h hat I acting on a basis state like this, so this is not a basis state of the identical particle, this is the original basis state, right? The W's for non-identical particles. So if you act with the h hat I on a product like this, see it acts only on the ith only the term that is function of Ri, right? Because H hat I is a differential operator that involves Ri. So it acts on URI or UNI, Ri, and gives you back the eigenvalue ENI. But when you take this object, H hat n, which is sum over all the H hat i's, then this gives you sum over all the ENI's, okay, that are there in the product. So sum over I equal to 1 to n ENI times same product. Is this clear? So what this is telling us is that the eigenvalue of H hat n does not change under permutations of the Ri's, right? So suppose you had replaced this by R2 and the second one by R1. This is not going to change, right? Because all that is going to change here is that N2 and N1 are going to get exchanged, right? Because now we have UN2 of R1, UN1 of R2. But because this involves sum over all the Ni's, this number remains unchanged. So the eigenvalue of H hat n does not change under the permutation of the Ri's. And that in turn means that when you apply H hat n on these basis states, okay, let me remind you that basis state again, which you have seen many times by now. Okay. So on this basis state, when you apply H hat n, then H hat n on this basis state, you can take H hat n inside, of course. You apply H hat n on this. On each of these terms, right, independent of what permutations you do, the result is sum over I in ENI. Okay. So that comes out of this sum because it's the same eigenvalue that you get. This will not be true for H hat I. H hat I will give different eigenvalues on the different terms, right? So you cannot take out that out of the sum, but for H hat n you can. So what this is telling us is that this basis states, that these are eigenstates of H hat n with eigenvalue that is given by the sum over the individual eigenvalues ENI. You can also write this in terms of occupancy number. So if the state has occupancy number M1, M2, etc., then the energy eigenvalue of the state can be written as sum over n equal to 1 to infinity Mn En, right? Because U1 appears M1 times in this sum, U2 appears M2 times in this sum, and so on. Is this clear?
Sir,
Yes.
sir, in the previous step, when we were using the initial wave function, we took the sum from I is equal to 1 to capital N. But in the when we are taking the occupancy, taking from 1 to infinity.
Okay, can you repeat again? When you are taking occupancy number, I am taking from 1 to infinity. Is that the question?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. See, the point is that in this representation, right, you are just going to specify what are N1, N2, and so on.
Yes.
So, for example, it could be that U1 appears once and U100 appears twice. Okay, imagine that you have a 3-particle state. So then in this sum, what will happen is that M1 should be 1.
Oh, all the others are 0.
All the others are 0.
Okay.
M100 will be 2 and all the others are 0. Right? That's why you get this. Right? So there are really n terms in the sum, even though it looks like there are infinite number of terms, because most of the Mn's are 0.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. If there are no other questions, you are going to end the discussion of this system here, and you will now turn to a different system. Okay. Because we'll eventually establish that the system that I discussed just now can be mapped to the system that we are going to discuss now. Second system, as you will see, in fact, is much simpler. Okay. So you forget about the first system that I considered, and you consider another quantum system. This will be a collection of infinite number of one-dimensional harmonic oscillators whose angular frequencies will be labeled as omega 1, omega 2, etc. And we will choose the omega n's such that omega n is given by En over h bar. So for this reason, it was useful to choose the ENs to be positive. Okay, otherwise, well, omega n of course can be negative, but the point is ultimately when you are going to use this formula, we will assume that omega n's are positive. So it's a different system, but this system is not totally independent of the first system, because what we are saying is that for each single particle energy eigenstate of the original theory, we introduce a harmonic oscillator. Okay, so there are actually infinite number of harmonic oscillators, because typically energy of single particle energy eigenstates have infinite number of energy eigenstates. So there are infinite number of harmonic oscillators we introduce with angular frequency omega n given by n by h bar. So this is a new quantum system, and we can quantize the new quantum system just as we quantize a harmonic oscillator. So I am assuming that you have already all seen the creation and annihilation operators for harmonic oscillator. So for each harmonic oscillator, which is labeled by this index n, we introduce creation and annihilation operators an and an dagger, satisfying the usual commutation relation. So you see that for n and p different, they all commute, right? Because they are independent quantum systems. When n and p are equal, the a still commute, a daggers commute, but a and a dagger gives you 1. This is familiar to everybody?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I can proceed. Okay, so here is the Hamiltonian of this harmonic oscillator system, which is given here. See, individual harmonic oscillators is h bar omega times a dagger a plus half. So because we have a collection of harmonic oscillators, so a generic the total Hamiltonian will be given by the sum of the Hamiltonians of the individual harmonic oscillators. Okay, so that's given here. And this one I'll write in a slightly different way. I'll write this as h bar omega n times a n dagger n plus some infinite constant which you will not worry about. And in fact, as I have already mentioned, in quantum field theory, we will be interested mostly in measuring differences of energies. So an overall constant in the expression for the energy will really have no effect on what we are going to do. So this constant from now on we are going to draw. And we'll think of the harmonic oscillator Hamiltonian as just sum over n, h bar omega n, a n dagger n. Okay. So given this, we can now define the ground state. So ground state, which is also called the vacuum state for reason that I'll describe below, is the state where each of the ends annihilate the state. Okay, so it's basically the product of the ground states of individual harmonic oscillators. Okay, because each of the ends annihilate the ground state. And then all other states in this quantum system will be created by applying arbitrary combinations of a n daggers on the vacuum state. So you can apply a1 dagger on vacuum, or a1 dagger, a3 dagger on vacuum, a5 dagger, a100 dagger, a3 dagger on vacuum, and so on. Okay. Now what we'll show is that this quantum theory, this looks like a completely different quantum theory, right? That we have introduced a collection of harmonic oscillators, quite independent of the system of many particle states that we were considering earlier. But what we are going to show is that this quantum theory is related to the system that we considered earlier. But of course, to say that it's related to the system considered earlier, you have to describe how the states of this system are mapped to the states of the earlier system. Right? And then you have to check how the operators map. So under certain identification of the states, we will argue that this quantum theory is related to the earlier multi-particle quantum theory that we are considering. Let me first describe how we are going to identify the states. So in the multi-particle system, we label the states by these labels, right? U, N1, N2 up to Nn, okay? Symmetrized in the RIs, right? Which automatically makes it symmetrized under the lines. That state we claim will map, including normalization, to a state like this. A N1 dagger, A N2 dagger up to A N dagger acting on the vacuum. So very simple map, right? You take the indices here, you put the labels there. And furthermore, we can see that just like these were symmetric under the exchange of the labels, right? U N1, N2 is the same as U N2, N1. Similarly, these are also symmetric under the exchange of Ni and Nj. And that follows because the AI daggers all commute. Right? If you had a N1 dagger, A N2 dagger on the vacuum, that's the same as A N2 dagger, A N1 dagger on the vacuum.
So here the N1 is less than N2, that condition is not.
Well, you can put it, right? You don't have to, but if you want to classify the independent states, right?
Yeah.
Also, you would like to put N1 less than N2, right? So the A2 dagger, A1 dagger on the vacuum is the same as A1 dagger, A2 dagger on the vacuum.
Yes, yes.
Right? So they are not independent states, right? So if you are trying to classify the independent basis states, then again here you will order them.
Okay. Thanks.
Right? Okay? So if you want, instead I want to use the occupation number representation. Say state 1 is occupied M1 times, state 2 is occupied M2 times, and so on. Then it will be A1 dagger to the M1, A2 dagger to the M2, and so on acting on the vacuum. Is that clear? Okay. So now, if we want to claim that these two states are equivalent, we have to make sure that some things that we had done earlier are the same. In particular, for these states, we had found some certain orthonormality conditions, right? Certain states are orthonormal, certain states are not orthonormal, right? Certain states are they give you non-zero inner product, but inner product is not necessarily 1. You have to make sure that the corresponding states on this side also have the same property. So for this, you have to, what we compute is the inner product of a state like this, or you can use representations like this also, it doesn't matter, and a corresponding conjugate state. Okay, so you will take another inner product, another state like this with different indices, M1 prime, M2 prime, etc., and take the inner product. And we want to make sure that this inner product will have the same structure as the inner product that we found from here. Is this clear? What we are what we need to do?
Sir, one thing.
Yes.
So in the previous case, so there were all the particles are in the same potential. So if we just solve the Schrodinger equation for one particle, so we will have some energy levels, and that energy level is available for every particle.
Yes.
But here you are introducing some infinite number of harmonic oscillator of infinite number of different frequencies.
Yes.
So we have sets of levels. So we have corresponding to omega 1, corresponding to omega 2 a set of levels. So how that is going to map in the cases, in two cases?
Well, we'll see. This is a map of the states. We have to make sure that the Hamiltonians agree, right?
Yeah, right.
So we'll see that, or we know what is the energy eigenvalue of this Hamiltonian, right?
Right.
We have to
Right.
check that agree with the energy eigenvalue of this Hamiltonian.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right? So you have to make sure the energy eigenvalues are the same, right?
Okay. So that is how it is going to.
It's not that okay. So we have to keep in mind that the mapping is like this.
Right.
Particle number 1 here has nothing to do with the particle number, oscillator number 1 on this side. That's not the way the mapping goes. Right? So here you have total symmetry between particle 1 and 2 exchange, right? Arbitrary exchange of the n particles.
Yes.
Here the particles are obviously distinct, right?
Right.
Different harmonic oscillator, different frequencies.
Right. They are different frequencies.
Yeah, so it's not that the n particle system here
Yes.
is equivalent to an n particle system here. It's an infinite particle system all through.
Okay. Yeah.
The
Right.
mapping is more complicated, okay, but this is the mapping. This is the mapping between states.
So we are only mapping here the how the states will behave here. How
And
the state.
how the operators will behave, right? If you
Okay.
want to claim that two systems are equivalent,
Mhm.
first you have to understand how the states map. Right? That's what you have given here.
Yes, yes.
Hamiltonians obviously have to map because this has its own Hamiltonian, this one has its own Hamiltonian.
Right, right.
And then you have to make sure that given every operator here,
Mm-hmm.
we can find a corresponding operator here.
Okay,
Right? Only
Okay.
then we will be able to say that the two systems are equivalent.
equivalent. Yeah, sure, sure. All right.
Is that clear?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Those two, any question?
Not yet, sir.
Okay. Okay. So now we calculate the inner product. And the way we calculate the inner product will be by taking the AIs to the right. Okay, so you have these A's and they are the A daggers. So we try to take the A's to the right using the computation relation that we have given, and the A daggers to the left. And the result that you'll use is that when the A, if any A comes to the extreme right, it annihilates the vacuum, right? That's part of this definition here. If you take the conjugate of this, then A dagger annihilates the vacuum on the right or the left, right? So 0 on A dagger, I think I have written it somewhere, maybe here. So using this, we'll try to manipulate these expressions like this. Okay. So first, let's see what happens if the MIs and MI primes are not equal. Let's imagine that M1 and M1 prime are not equal. Okay. Then see, the other AIs don't matter, right? We can bring all the AIs to the all the A's and A daggers, all the A1 and A1 dagger to the extreme right and do our manipulation because they all commute to the other AIs. So we have a product A1 to the M1, A1 dagger to the M1 prime. Imagine that M1 is larger than M1 prime. So then every time we are going to use the commutation relation A1, A1 dagger is equal to 1 plus A1 dagger A1. Right? Here. A1, A1 dagger is equal to 1 plus A1 dagger A1. So the 1 remains and A1 comes to the right. So if you repeat this process, every time you find A1, A1 dagger, you keep moving it to the right. If at the end, if number of A1s was more than the number of A1 daggers, at the end what will happen is that there will be one A1 which will come to the extreme right. So after all, suppose there are two A1s and one A1 dagger. One A1 you can prevent from going to the right by picking up the A1, A1 dagger commutator. Right? A1, A1 dagger, you write as 1 plus A1 dagger A1. You pick up the 1 because A1 dagger A1 will kill the vacuum. For the second A1, there is no A1 dagger left anymore. Right? The second A1 will just act on the vacuum and give you 0. So if the number of A1s is more than the number of A1 daggers, then you get 0 because you get one extra A1 to the right. If the number of A1 daggers is more than the number of A1, you get 0 because you get a 1 A1 dagger to the left, and then that gives you 0 by using this relation. So it's clear that in order that this is non-zero, the occupancy numbers must be equal. M1 should be equal to M1 prime, M2 should be equal to M2 prime, and so on. Is this clear? Renu, it's clear? Renu Raman?
Yes.
Clear? Okay. Vikram?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anybody else has any question? Okay, so now we are going to check what happens when all the MI and MI primes are equal. So this calculation is a little more involved, okay, but this I've left as an exercise, but just doing one example. To check that if you do this, you get this product M1 factorial times M2 factorial and so on. And that's exactly what we have discovered as the inner product between these states. So this calculation can be done independently for A1, for A2, and so on, right? Because it's clear that the commutation between A2 and A1 is trivial always. A2 and A1 dagger also commutes, A2 and A1 also commutes. So you can always bring A1, A1 dagger next to each other, A2, A2 dagger next to each other, etc., and do the manipulation. So here I have just given one simple example. A1 square, A1 dagger square. So how will you manipulate this? You first write it out. A1, A1, A1 dagger, A1 dagger. Then A1, A1 dagger. So here A1 and A1 dagger sit next to each other. Our goal is to always move the A1 to the right. So I write this as A1 dagger A1 plus 1. So let's pick the 1. Here you have A1 dagger A1. Sorry, A1 A1 dagger. We again replace this A1 A1 dagger by A1 dagger A1 plus 1. Now this term gives you 0 because A1 acting on the vacuum gives you 0. So you are left with the 1. In the other term, A1 A1 dagger, A1 A1 dagger, both A1 A1 dagger you replace by A1 dagger A1 plus 1. And you can again convince yourself that the only term that remains at the end is just the 1. So you get 1 plus 1, that's 2. Okay, which agrees with this 2 factorial. More generally, what you will find is that if you start with A1 to the M1 and A1 dagger to the M1 and start moving the A1s to the right, the first A1 you keep moving, okay, you pick up 1 and then you have A1 A1 dagger again. You get A1 times you get 1. Then you start with the second A1, keep moving. So ultimately the number of times you get 1 is M1 times M1 minus 1 times M2 minus M1 minus 2 and so on, and that gives you M1 factorial. And the same thing can be repeated for M2, M3 and so on. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
So the conclusion from here is that this state has the same norm as the state as this state in the first theory. Okay, so that's the first thing to check, right? In fact, that is the reason why we didn't normalize it to 1, right? We kept the normalization as M1 factorial, M2 factorial products, and that's because this state also has naturally the same normalization. Okay, so these states map to each other as far as inner products between states are concerned. So this gives a map between the Hilbert spaces of the 2 theories. So what we will do now is to compare the energy eigenvalues in the 2 quantum systems. So let's take this state AN1 dagger up to ANN dagger and apply H hat. Okay, so what is H hat? H hat now refers to the harmonic oscillator Hamiltonian, right? Remember that in the original system we had an n particles and we denoted the Hamiltonian by H hat n. Whenever you have no subscript, that will refer to the harmonic oscillator system. So H hat acting on a state like this. So H hat is here. It's acting on a product like this. And now we can easily verify that the commutator between this and AP dagger, basically only the n equal to p term will contribute, because other terms of course just commute with AP dagger. Only the n equal to p term will commute, and that gives you h bar omega p times AP dagger. So now what we can do is we can take this and start commuting with AN1 dagger. Okay, that will give you h bar omega n1 times the same state. Okay, but this has moved to the next position. Okay. Then we commute it to the next one, AN2 dagger. That will give you h bar omega n2. And then we move to the next one and so on. And so by the time you have applied h hat, okay, once this comes to the extreme right, it gives you 0 because there is an n that acts on the vacuum. So H hat acting on this has an eigenvalue like this. And now we recall that h bar omega n was chosen to be En. So this is nothing but En1 to Enn acting on a state like this. And here I just note that we have dropped the constant C from the Hamiltonian. Is this clear?
Sir, how are we getting this equation, this step when we applied H on A N1 dagger into because in the
Okay.
commutation, yes.
Yeah. So let's look at this. H on AP dagger. It tells us that H on AP dagger is AP dagger H plus this, right?
Yes.
Okay. So this term gives you back H bar omega P times the original state.
Yes.
This term H, we are using, think of this as a sum of two terms. So H on AP dagger is AP dagger on H. We'll deal with that term later. And then H bar omega P times AP dagger. So there is one term which is H bar omega P times AP dagger. In this case, H bar omega P times AN1 dagger. And the rest of the terms are the same. So it gives you H bar omega N1 times the rest of the terms, right? That's this term.
Yes.
So now what is left is that there is an AN1 dagger first, and this has moved to the right. So it's AN1 dagger, H, AN2 dagger, AN3 dagger, and so on, right?
Yes.
Now we apply H on AN2 dagger.
Yes.
Use this again. So H on AN2 dagger will give you H bar omega N2 times AN2 dagger. Okay. That gives you second term over here. And then you have AN1 dagger, AN2 dagger, H, and then AN3 dagger, and so on, right? So you keep moving H one by one step at a time. Okay. So first step you pick up H bar omega N1, second step you pick up H bar omega N2, and so on.
Sir, this square bracket thing is then a commutation actually. H comma AP dagger.
Yeah. This square bracket means commutator.
Yeah. So then the second minus term we are taking to the right. Oh,
Exactly. Yes, that's right.
Yes.
So you are using. So let's do one. H hat on A1 dagger, A2 dagger on that, right? So you write H hat A1 dagger as A1 dagger H hat plus H bar omega N1 times H hat. That you can do using this. Sorry, H bar omega N1 times A1 dagger. Okay. Is this clear or not clear?
yes, it's clear.
Yes, sir.
Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, did I stop sharing or am I still sharing?
It stopped sharing.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. If this is not clear, we'll do it again, right? But if you just consider A1 dagger, A2 dagger, right, and apply this twice. Basically, what you have to do, you write H hat A1 dagger is A1 dagger H hat plus omega 1 H bar omega 1 times A1 dagger. Okay, that follows from this. And then you apply it twice. Once on A1 dagger, once on A2 dagger.
Sir,
Yes.
should we not here worry about the degeneracy? Let's say, like in the first formalism, if the Hamiltonian had degeneracy, let's say E1 and E2 are same,
Okay.
then that would correspond to two harmonic oscillators with same frequency, right?
That is true. Yes.
So, those two, like the particles that those two harmonic oscillators create, those will be the same.
Yes, but they are not identical necessarily. We are not declaring them to be identical.
Okay.
Okay. So even if there is degeneracy, right, there will be harmonic oscillators with the same frequency, but we will not declare them as identical particles.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Yeah.
Because it's up to us to declare whether the particles are identical or not, right?
Mhm.
Two particles with the same mass may not be identical particles.
Okay.
Okay, so Aparajita, if this is not clear, just send me a mail and we'll discuss it again next time.
Yes, sir.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, in the previous discussion, like instead of saying that two harmonic oscillators of same frequency, can we say that that a single harmonic oscillator, but it is like excited to its second energy level?
No, we don't want to do that. See, the point is we really want to introduce one harmonic oscillator for each energy level of the original system. Whether
So-
they have degeneracy or not in each energy eigenstate, right? If there are two eigenstates of the same energy, we'll introduce two harmonic oscillators with the same frequency.
Okay.
Okay, so that means that the same energy can appear in two particle system. Same energy can appear multiple times,
Yes, sir.
right? See, it's like if you think of identical particles, right? Imagine that there is an energy level degeneracy. 1 and 2 are degenerate. But nevertheless, if the particle 1 is in 1 and particle 2 is in 2, and if the particle 1 is in 2 and particle 2 is in 1, those are the same state. But if the particle 1 is in 1, particle 2 is in 1, that's one state. And if the particle 1 is in 2, particle 2 is in 2, that's a distinct state. Right? Even though the energies are the same of these two.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes.
So if two energy levels are distinct, is degenerate, we don't care. We still introduce one harmonic oscillator for each energy level. So multiple harmonic oscillators of the same frequency band.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so this then agrees with the energy eigenvalue of H hat n, right? Because if you recall, H hat n has exactly this energy eigenvalue. Okay, let me show you that formula if I can find it. Here, right? That was the eigenvalue of H hat n of the first system. And what we see is that this harmonic oscillator system has exactly the same energy eigenvalue. So at least we see that not only that the states have the same kind of norm, okay, same kind of orthonormality properties, okay, but the eigenstates of H hat n get mapped to the eigenstate of H hat with the same eigenvalue. But of course, this is not the end of the story, right? You have to make sure that every operator in the first theory can be mapped to every operator in the second theory. But unfortunately, we'll see that the converse is not true. Unfortunately or fortunately, in fact, that is the reason why you want to do quantum field theory. Okay. The difference between these two systems is that when you try to specify the first system, it requires that you fix the value of n. Right? In order to define the quantum system, you have to first say that you have n particles and then build a Hilbert space. So total number of particles have to be specified from the beginning in the first system. But that is not the case in the second system. The second system is more versatile. It can describe a single particle state. A dagger on vacuum is a single particle state. If you look at this map, that if capital N is 1, right, that means that is only one level. That corresponds to only one creation operator acting on the vacuum. AN1 dagger, AN2 dagger on the vacuum gives a two particle state. The vacuum itself is a zero particle state because there is no N dagger acting on it. Right? In fact, this is the reason why you call it the vacuum. Okay? So this harmonic oscillator system can describe at one go states with multiple number of particles. And for a given value of n in the first system, it maps to a subspace of states in the second system, which has n particles, n creation of particles acting on the vacuum. So it's not that the Hilbert spaces of the second system and the first system are identical. The correct statement is that the Hilbert space of the first system is a subspace of the Hilbert space of the second system. Only when you take the collection of all n's, right, you have not one system, but for n equal to 1, 2, 3, 3 particle, 4 particle, 5 particle quantum mechanics, the collection of all these quantum mechanics maps to this harmonic oscillator system that you are considering. So this is something we'll study in more detail in the next lecture, but I think we have to stop. because somebody else will be using the same Zoom for the next class. But are there quick questions at this stage?
So I had one thing to ask. Hello.
Go
Hello.
ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So are we still retaining the meaning of in the sense of harmonic oscillator when we solve it? We can actually write the ground state as some Gaussian state if we take it in the position basis, and higher state as some Hermite Gaussian modes. But all
We
that are we trying to retain?
Yeah, we can if you want. It's not very useful. And this position has nothing to do with the position of the particles that we started.
Yes. So
Yeah.
in that way, there is no mapping.
No.
It's just an abstract level mapping in the
Exactly.
sense.
That's right. Well, we'll see that this position space that we're talking about actually become the field of quantum theory, the quantum field space. Okay, but that will come much later. Okay,
All right.
right now it's just an abstract mapping.
All right.
And perhaps I should also add that even though it was supposed to be a course on quantum field theory, the fields have not made its appearance yet, but they will eventually appear. We will see that the second system, right, which is versatile, can also be rewritten as a third system, which will be a system that describes quantum field theory. But we will continue tomorrow. So if you have any further questions, you can send me on email, but tomorrow also I'll, before the class starts, when at the beginning of the class, I'll ask for questions. So any questions that you have, you can ask tomorrow morning at the beginning of the class.
Sir, can you please share the slides with us? If
I
possible?
have actually, it's on the on my web page, but if you want, I can share the slides also by email.
Okay.
Did you have a look at my web page, or did you access my web page? I had sent out a message giving the web page address. So the slides, in fact, for tomorrow's slides also, I'll put on the web page by tonight.
Okay.
But if you want me to send by email, you just send me an email and I'll send it to you. Okay, so I'm logging out now.